We have an exciting segment for you now. As I mentioned in my opening address, the FTE Digital Innovation and Startup members have decided to take the lead on addressing the lack of meaningful industry progress on data sharing, and a task force has been created to forge a way forward, and a number of those members will share early thoughts and recommendations on that key effort now. Now, let me pass the floor over to my good friend, surely the godfather of modern airport technology, Mr. Samuel Ingalls, the principal at Barich, who helped me launch FTE, and as you can see, is still very much at the center of many of our most exciting efforts. For those of you who don't know, Sam spent 30 years before his role at Barich leading technology strategy for Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas, and also steered many important industry association advancement efforts successfully. So he's certainly the perfect man to be in the middle of this important effort. Let's give him a warm welcome as he heads to lead us on.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dan, and thank you all. You get an extra 2 gold stars, okay? You just stick them right there, front and center, for being here at 8:15, especially after a party night, right, and a gala celebration. So, pleasure to be with you this morning. By the way, just a note of remembrance. We probably all remember where we were on 9/11, and today is, of course, that same day. I was at an aviation conference in Montreal. Actually, I'm looking out here, others were as well, and that was a day we'll all never forget. So, but brighter and richer things here today. And so let's jump into data sharing, and it is up on the screen there. You know, in the early days of aviation, there wasn't much data to share. Right? I mean, you look at the check-in desk there, there's not even a computer, there's not any technology. People are walking out to the plane, and, you know, so not a whole lot of data transmitting across that environment at all, if any at all. I mean, really just some internal data. Well, times have certainly changed, there's no question about that. And I want to kind of frame this from the standpoint of ACI World saying that passenger traffic is going to double over the next 25 years or so. So as you look at these pictures, you know, how are we going to accommodate all of those additional customers in a guest positive manner as well, but then even from an operational efficiency standpoint? How is that going to happen? We certainly have to become more efficient ourselves. As you look across this kind of set of pictures, which kind of displays the journey experience from reserving the flight, purchasing the ticket all the way through the land side, some curbside processing there into perhaps self-bag drop, dropping the bag off, wayfinding, going through interacting with other agencies, right? TSA in that picture, of course, sit right in the middle of everything at any airport. Concessions and other things out at the gate in the hold room experience, whether that's automated boarding, a lot going on in that area as well. Again, other federal agencies, CBP, and then actually all the way out to the hotel. But one other factor that I think we really want to kind of touch on here and think about, keep in focus, is baggage. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. There's a really rich set of data that's really set to flow now in that entire baggage environment. So that's an exciting opportunity. We want to make sure that stays in focus. That connected ramp environment, wow, more data out on that ramp than I think there ever was. You know, are we really kind of starting to see, finally, perhaps, the death of the clipboard? And maybe at some point in time, 200 years from now, they'll find a clipboard, you know, dig one out and say, wow, what was this? Right? There is a very, very rich set of data out in that environment there. I mentioned baggage. And this was an interesting one that maybe we can talk a little more about. And this is a case with the air tags and a couple of these meltdowns, recent meltdowns, where the customer had more visibility to where their bag was than the airline did. And what the industry did to actually come alongside, work with Apple, and to change that and to make sure that that could be ported into the airline systems. And then really, you know, it does get down to the guest experience, right? The guest probably has several different apps that they use, and you know, why do we make them try to find the source of truth and to integrate the data? Just a difficult experience. Now, it's not like we haven't done anything. The industry really worked hard almost 20 years ago now to create the Aviation Information Data Exchange. And previous to that, just something as simple as flight information was a customized feed for those airports that had it, and many didn't. especially the smaller airports, didn't have that customized feed. The industry said this really isn't that difficult. All the FIDS providers participated in the IATA standard setting exercise, and ADIX is on, I want to say its 17th or 18th revision, but very heavily used in the industry, and it's been expanded outside of FID. So it's not like the industry hasn't done anything, and that has provided a real opportunity for data sharing across the ecosystem in a very simplistic, standardized manner. So really what we need to do is break down these silos. The industry has been very siloed over time. It's grown very siloed, and it's really important, I think, that, and this is kind of the kickoff for this think tank, what we're calling a data sharing think tank under FTE, and really time to start breaking down these data silos to drive operational efficiency and guest experience. So we've got a great set of panelists. This is the point at which if you want to pull your phone out and hit that QR code, please do, because I really want to pull you into the discussion, right? So your questions, your comments, I'll be monitoring that on my iPad here, no clipboard, and I will make sure that we make this as interactive as we can with all of our great team here. So I'm going to hand it off. We've got just some quick comments, a set of comments by each one to kind of help frame the discussion. And you can start your comments and questions flowing in right now, but I'm going to hand it over to Christian to kick us off here.
Thank you, Sam. I've noticed you put us airport, airline, airport, airline.
Exactly right.
I think that's good, because I think that's where a lot of the data sharing needs to be, is between the airports and the airlines. And so Sam asked each of us to take a few minutes to give some initial thoughts. And so I have 3 slides, and the way that I structured my slides were there are 3 different thoughts around how airports and airlines can share data. The first one is a success story. And it's a small one, but I think it shows the power of airlines and airports sharing data on the local level. So I'm with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, so that's DCA and IAD Airport. And this example is from DCA. So DCA, for anybody familiar with it, it's an airport that is remarkably close to the city. It's a business travel heavy airport. If you live in or around DC, it's where you want to fly out of because it's so close. It has parking garages that are right next to the terminal. They're fairly elastic in their pricing capacity, so we really can't price them high enough to merge demand. People want to come, they want to park because it's right there. The economy lot is not really an option for that type of parker. And for the most time, we average 80, 85% capacity, doing pretty good. But we do have a lot of moments where we sell out of the parking garage. And so the airport manager reached out to American Airlines, which is the hub carrier, or the de facto hub carrier there, and said, can we find a way to figure out when we're going to sell out of parking so that we can cut off advanced reservations, so we could do things to smooth that demand curve. And they had, it seems like, a dozen meetings where they just went over data, trying to find something that was a leading indicator. And what they did was they found that because it's such a business airport, there is a pretty large delta between arriving passengers and departing passengers throughout the day. And so what it is the business traveler, the prototypical business traveler, leaves in the morning, comes back in the evening, whether it's that day or a couple days later. And during the day is where we have our capacity constraint, because the car passengers can't exchange the same parking spot. And so what they were able to do is find a correlation that lets them predict with remarkable accuracy when a parking situation is going to happen at the airport. And so every day, the airline and the airport get together, they map out the demand curve, they look at it, they predict 2 or 3 days out parking situations, and the airport responds. Since that started happening, that daily data exchange, we have cut the number of times that we sell out of our parking garages. We've cut it by 70%. And so it's a huge impact from sharing data at the local level. Another example is a favorite of mine. This is more of a theoretical, and it's something that my colleague in the room, Pat Skelton, and I think my colleague Wilson is also working on. And it's about Dulles. If you're familiar with Dulles, we have these large buses. We call them mobile lounges. People call them moon buggies. I heard somebody at the conference call it a container on wheels. It's a pretty good description. They effectively, for us, are our sterile corridor. We have no physical corridor to our primary customs facility. So when you arrive on an international flight and you need to get to customs, for the most part, you are taking one of these devices. They were built in 1962 or 1971, depending on the model. They have absolutely no electronics in them. What is always amazing about them is the way the pickup process works is very similar to me picking up my wife at the airport. Sometimes I get there early, sometimes I get there too early, sometimes I'm late, shouldn't like that. Just like passengers don't like that. And it really is the operator on these devices just sitting there on their phones, watching Flight Radar 24, Flight Aware, and going, oh, I guess I should go to the gate and pick them up. And it's worked for us for 60 years. But as international demand keeps skyrocketing, we keep having situations where passengers are having to wait to get on these mobile lounges because we aren't dispatching efficiently. We've done a lot of work within the airport to figure out how to dispatch them efficiently, but we can't do it without the data from the airlines. And so as we go through the rest of this year and next year, working with the airlines is going to have a direct impact on the passengers. And it's just a good example of that. And the last slide, quickly, I wanted to talk about, and this is more for my airport colleagues. I'm always struck, at least in my two airports, when we talk about airline data sharing, it always seems to be this. Why won't the airlines give us data about the passengers? We want passenger information. And we'll be honest to ourselves sometimes, and we'll say we want it because we want to make more money off the passengers to extract more revenue. And there's always a challenge and always a debate of who's the passenger, is it the airline or the airports? Are the airlines justified in being concerned, sharing the data with the airports because of FOIA requirements and stuff like that? What I always want to argue is that I think we're looking at the wrong thing. If we look at the airfield, the airline operations, that's where our interests align. My interest with Keith, with you, is the same as yours with that airplane. It's getting it out as fast as possible. And so we can work on data sharing there. I think we have a common interest. So those are my thoughts. I'm really excited to be part of this long-term working group, and I think we're going to have some good discussions.
Excellent. Did you have one more there?
These are repeats, actually.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah.
So if you want a nice preview of my slides again.
There we go. Yeah, that's somehow that good.
There we go.
Okay, there we are. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, and really pleased to see everybody here at the inaugural session of Insomniacs Anonymous. So I'm Keith Walters. I'm with International Airlines Group, IAG, and we are the parent company for British Airways, Aer Lingus, Iberia, Vueling, and who else have I missed? Level. And my role is very much looking about the innovation that's out there and trying to understand how we can leverage that to help our operation. We need to be more efficient, we need to be cost effective in what we're doing, and we need to be good for our customers so that the customers come back. Now, one of the projects that I was involved in was timestamping technology and the use of video analytics at airports. And I've run a number of different trials across our networks at different airports. And one of the things that came out to me was that, yeah, we can put that system in, we can have video analytics there, but it just tells me part of a story. And it only tells me what's going on for those flights, and it's only as good as the user actually using it on the day. And that uptake, unfortunately, is not as good as it should be. So what we looked at is how do we get more out of that? And that led to a much bigger picture about, actually it's about getting a full picture of data so you understand how your operation works. So what we've done is we looked at the problems and that we have in these areas and where we are today and then where we want to be, and then what are we actually going to get from it at the end of the day. And what we could see is that there's definitely opportunities, but we need to be able to unlock data because that's what's key. And it's got to be accurate data, it's got to be objective data, and it's got to be current and relevant. And traditionally, airlines set precision time schedules. The precision time schedules based on timings from the different activities. And that's always been a manual process of recording those activities. Well, actually, it's not that accurate because it all depends on who it is that's recording that. Whereas when you start bringing in timestamping technology, you'll start to get that more objective data because it's a one single version of the truth. But you need to take that further. It's not just about what happens at the stand on the ramp. It's what happens at the start, so where the passengers are coming into the airport. So there's that activity going to the check-in desk. Have we got the right number of check-in desks? How many people are flowing through those desks? How many agents are actually on those desks and operating the systems? How many bag drops have we got? And then each of the different stages of the passenger going through that journey, and then on the other end, when they arrive, what are the data points that we've got? And if we are able to start filling in those gaps and bring that together, then we're looking at getting something that gives us much greater performance, not only about on-time performance, but also around the ability to affect that customer satisfaction score. It's also about safety. It's about how events are recorded and how you actually deal with them. So by bringing all those different elements together, we're very much looking at creating a cycle that takes us all the way around. And this circle really just gives you a good idea about what we're talking about. And we start with the fact that you've got contracts for each of the different services that you have as an airline with the ground handlers, with the airports, etc. And we need to digitalize them. We need to understand what all the different fine details of that 16, 30, 100-page document is. What are we actually asking from our suppliers? How do we measure it? And then, is there a data stream that links to that? So, and the vast majority of those data streams are not in our gift, so we have to work together. So then going on to the data capture, it's not just about timestamping, it's about all other systems. Ground handlers have their own systems. How do we link into that? The cameras are across the airport. How do we get the metadata from those cameras to be able to align to what is actually happening at check-in? How many desks are open? What's the flow through security? And then combining all of that data so that you really do get a proliferation of data. You want that large mass for every single flight, because that builds up your knowledge. Use the AI technology to really drive down into that data and understand your operation. And then you can automate a lot of the billing cycle, a lot of the reconciliation, the invoices that you get. How do you validate that a jet bridge was attached to an aircraft? How do you validate that toilet services were provided to that aircraft? How do you validate that there were 6 economy check-in desks open between these times? So it's about doing that. And then that starts to come around in another circle, because now what you're able to do is to really sort of benchmark what you're getting as delivery of service, and then go out there and look to improve. And by getting that complete circle, then we start to do that. Now, for my side of things, I'm looking to try and create a blueprint across airports, because where we have our discussions to say, let's get involved with this airport, and we have an agreement for the services provided, do we have an actual specification for what our data requirement is? And if we have that engagement, that relationship, how do we do that across the networks? And I think it is a big challenge, but there is a basic level of requirement. How that data is being collected will vary per station, but you need to be able to state what it is you want in the first place. So, and how you're going to get that data. So there's certainly some challenges. When Samuel came to us about this project, I really did feel this was perfectly timed, because when IAG, we're not looking at delivering for one airline, we're looking to deliver for all the airlines in our group. And that kind of fits in really well, because we should be able to share between airlines and airports around the world far more, because it's for the benefit of all. It's not about commercial agreement. It's about what would be the standards that we would expect. And I think each of the airlines would expect certain standards. And then once you've got that level, then you can talk about your commercial thing on individual levels. You need to have that first understanding of what you're expecting. Well, I'll hand on. But, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gudmundur.
So thank you, everyone, for showing up. We're getting more and more people to the room. That's very,
that's
very
exactly
good to
right.
see.
Go ahead, if you're new to the room, hit that QR code, and you can get those questions and comments flowing in. Gudmundur, back to you.
A little bit about me. My name is Gudmundur Karl, and I'm the Director of Digital Development at Kessler Airport. I've been at the airport for 15 years now, working on various roles, but always heavily related to data, utilization of data, and I'm very commercially focused. I put my contact information in there. You can see that I'm in data because my slides were not made by a marketing team, so bear with me on that. So I'm going to share with you a little example of a project we worked on. I call it the economics of the security line. Sounds really cool. The name was made up by ChatGPT, not myself, but it kind of tells you what I'm going to talk about. So we all know this problem, and we've been in conferences after conferences talking about the waiting time in security and how it affects, and just in general, how passenger experience affects revenue. We know that every minute a passenger spends in a security line is a minute they're not shopping, it's a minute wasted in something else. But we also know that long waits create this frustration and stress and anxiety, and which we do believe that leads to loss of revenue. And I think we can all agree, airports, we lose millions in revenue every year because of bottlenecks at the security checkpoint. So what we wanted to do in this, we wanted to see, can we put a value on it? And how can we put a value on it? So we went into a really interesting work with the concessionaires, and we decided to combine the data we have. So the data that the concessionaire has is transactional data. They, of course, and we are, I would say, lucky. Some people would say unlucky, but all the concessionaires in Keflavik, they have to scan the boarding pass when you make a purchase. And that gives us such a good insight, because all of a sudden, the transactional data that the concessionaire have includes who, meaning the boarding pass. We see when they were buying, and we see the value of the purchase, so how much was bought. And the airport data, and I think most airports today have some kind of a Bluetooth tracking or cube measurement, but we also have boarding pass scanning at various locations throughout the airport. So in our case, we know who, and that's how we connect the data points. Because of the boarding pass scan, we know when the passenger were at these different boarding pass scan stations, and we know the what, which is what was happening at this point in time, how long the queue was, or we could extend it to any other operational thing. And the result of it, by combining this, we could see very, very clearly how waiting time impacted our revenue. And the outcome was, it was surprisingly high. We see that passenger in Keflavik who wait 5 to 10 minutes in the queue, they spend 15 to 20% less than the passenger who waits 0 to 5 minutes. So that's pretty big. There are probably so many things other we can find, but we just started with this small analysis. And what is also interesting, if you can see the graph, you probably don't see the numbers, but each line represents how much time the passenger had at the airport. So it's interesting to see people that have 2.5 hours, it even affects them pretty heavily, even though they had such a long time. So it isn't just about the time that they spent, it's also about the stress factor. And I think by looking at those passengers, we can put a value on the stress factor. But it isn't enough to just know it. We have to put this knowledge into action. So so what we did is that we built a very simple optimization for security staffing on the day of operation. So every time, let's say that the security is understaffed, they can see the true value of being understaffed, so they can make a really, really informed decision. Or it's not their decision. If the cost of adding or calling out a new security lane is less than the revenue lost, they do it. So it's not they don't do it based on gut feeling anymore. They can actually, they know the numbers and they can do the math. So that's what I wanted to share with you. A really simple project, data sharing project with the concessionaires.
Very cool.
Very good, thank you, Gudmundur. And Nicole,
Yeah.
with Alaska Airlines, you're up.
Hi, so Nicole Hodges-Austin, and while I'm certainly an innovation advocate, my official title is Innovation Program Manager for Alaska Airlines. And I wanted to share 2 projects that we've been working on over the past year that really centered on how we are moving bags both above and below wing to ease our customer journey, our guest journey, and help our ramp agents really be the most effective part of our team that they can be. Oh, there we go. So the first one is Bags ID/computer vision. We were really trying to figure out a way to prevent unnecessarily checking bags that are meant to be carry-on. So if you've ever been on a flight anywhere and they're asking for volunteers to check their bag because they think they're gonna run out of bin space, And then you walk on the plane and there's still plenty of bin space. It's incredibly frustrating. It leads to inconsistent guest experience. And we really wanted to start looking at how we can address that using technology. So we partnered with Bags ID to start counting carry-on bags and sizing them to see if we can determine when we actually need to start checking those carry-on bags without, again, providing an experience where you walk on and there's plenty of space. So that's above the wing. Below the wing, we've been partnering with Pattern Labs to do automated ramp dispatch. So if you have a hot transfer bag that needs to go to another tail, what's the optimum routing through Seattle to get to that bag to its next destination so we aren't getting a high MBR specifically around transfer bags. We're trying to provide a very consistent experience for guests that are traveling through Seattle, especially as we expand our routing globally. We're going to have more and more transfer bags and these types of situations coming through Seattle and many of our hubs. And we want to be able to optimize those routing, make it easy and intuitive for our ramp agents to get their bags to the next plane, and optimize the resource that's themselves of when can we really allow our agents to take their breaks, take their lunches, when do we need to improve staffing. So that's what we've been working on. It's data sharing between Alaska Airlines and these two vendors, but what can we do with it next? So with Bags ID, we can share it with our internal stakeholders. I think that's something we haven't really touched on. There's a lot of stakeholders internally with both an airline and an airport that can use these data points in ways that we may not have thought of right away. So our team that determines, we call it reduced overhead carry or rocking. The team that develops what is our rock target for each flight. How many bags should we be checking for each flight? Can we give them this data that we've been collecting over the past several months, and can they refine those rock targets and then even provide it to our CSAs in real time to say, hey, we've probably got 10% space left. You should probably start checking bags. Can we kind of change that process so it's more proactive and we're not, or a little bit less proactive, where we're not trying to just get a bunch of bags so we are out on time. It's more informed, but just as proactive. And then below the wing, with Pattern Labs, can we work with other airlines? Again, Seattle is a big transfer hub for us. Can we use Pattern to optimize taking bags from another airline so that we're getting those transfers efficiently, quickly, and not kind of losing it all in the shuffle of, oh, we have 20 bags from American Airlines, but we're only counting 15. Where did the other 5 go? Can we use this technology? Can we share the data across multiple airlines and airports so we know, what's the bag belt use rate? Can we improve just the flow of bags through the baggage system? So there's a lot of really great opportunities that we're seeing that we're starting, again, as an innovation team, we're starting just sharing what we can from Alaska to the individual vendors, but we are keeping in mind this larger ecosystem of how can we work with our One World partners, how can we work with our airport partners so that we can really expand this technology and overall improve the guest experience. Because to your point, Keith, we don't innovate in a vacuum. We innovate as a team. What's good for one guest is going to be good for all guests. So that's where Alaska is right now.
Very good. Thank you, Nicole. And I love the fact, it's really all about putting the right data in the right hands at the right time.
Exactly.
And that can be internal or external across that entire ecosystem. I love that you brought up partners as well, because I hear that from the airlines, that sometimes they have as much difficulty communicating data to and from their partners as they do with other external parties like the airport or third parties.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said. We've all, at least from the airline side, it's all been, oh, this is my data. I don't want to share it with you because what if you take away my competitive edge? And I fundamentally think that's the wrong way to look at this. It's not me as Alaska having a competitive edge over British Airways. It's me being a better partner to British Airways, because there will be routes and services that British Airways can address that Alaska cannot. So how can we make that experience more holistic for our guests?
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard a really good example, and maybe some of you have others, certainly, but recently from an airport where where in a hub environment, the entire traffic shifted. It was in advance of a holiday weekend, I believe it was, but the entire traffic, which was mostly hubbing, shifted to mostly O&D. And all of a sudden, there was total gridlock on the roadways. I mean, and nobody was ready for it. People missed flights. It was a horrible experience. And they got with the airline and said, and the airline said, well, yeah, we knew it was going to shift to that O&D market, right, or out of its normal hubbing pattern. And the airport said, wow, that would be great to know so that we could prepare for it, right? So, I mean, those are the kinds of things, sharing across the ecosystem, that are really good examples of where we can really, truly benefit. So I think this is an opportunity really to turn this plane onto the runway and take off, right? In so many respects, you touched on so many different elements. And as a think tank, next steps, we really want to start bringing people in. But do send your questions forward. One of the questions here that's already come in, what challenges have you faced receiving data from third parties, and how did you resolve those challenges? So again, whether you're an airline looking for additional data from the airport or maybe even from federal regulators, I want to kind of pull them into they're not up here on the stage, but they know they play a role too. They're right in the middle of the operation, whether TSA or CBP, maybe FAA in some respects, or other governmental entities in other countries. But what role, how does that happen? How do we integrate them into that data sharing environment? Thoughts? Yeah.
I'll have a stab at that. I think one of the things that we realized quite early on is when we're talking about innovation, the government agencies and that also need to be brought into the loop much earlier. And we have a really great relationship with the CAA in the UK. And we share with them all the innovation work that we're working on from the very early steps, because their main thrust when they're dealing with regulations is managing risk, and and that's based on what the technology is at the time that regulation is being written, and then obviously it's amended as time goes on. But when you bring in new technology, the risk pattern changes, and therefore that regulation needs to really be reconsidered. The earlier that you can do that, the far better you can get that adoption. So I'd certainly say that's one area that we found is very beneficial. Another area is that not one size fits all. We know that. And when we go out looking for data, particularly when you're talking about timestamping data, it can come from different places. It can come from the airport itself. It can come from the supplier that's producing the timestamping. Or it could come from even a third-party source. It could be the ground handler themselves. And each of those would have different requirements in that. So what we have to do is find that route through, but then remember what that route was. Because whatever that solution is, it may not apply to every airport, but it's more than likely going to apply to another airport somewhere else down the line. So again, you find what those routes are, and you deal with what the different challenges are, and then you find that way through. But make sure you learn from that to use it going forward. I think airlines, we've embraced, certainly within our group, AI technology. And I think that when it comes to data sharing, it really is a time now where we can do that better. Now, everybody is in fear of data breaches, but actually there's more technology out there to prevent it that we really need to embrace. And what we need to do is be quite bold in how we push those realms of the possible, rather than sit back and saying, no, I don't want to share data, I'm worried about a data breach. It's a real threat, don't get me wrong, but actually we need to also put our minds to how do we solve that, because enabling it will enable so much more for our customers, which are all of our customers. They're not just the airlines. And I know, we're guilty of it, airlines, passengers, our customers, but they are actually all of our customers.
Yeah. And so many times I think I hear people say, throw up the stop sign and say GDPR, PII, right? I mean, how do we work around and work through those things? Thoughts, Christian?
Well, so a couple thoughts on that. I mean, from the regulation perspective in terms of privacy, I think a lot of it is we tend to focus so much on, we want to protect the privacy of the individual, right? Which is all an important thing, and that's what all those regulations are for. One of the things that we've had tremendous success at our airports is really trying to think outside the box when it comes to data capture, right? My colleague, Pat Skelton over there, is doing some amazing work on thermal counting, right? And it's a neat idea. It's basically using thermal sensors to count people. One of the largest benefits is there's no PII or GDPR requirements, right? Because one of the things that I think we as an industry get so wrapped up on, especially on the airport side, is trying to understand the individual, but not really, we should be focusing on the math. So I think if we just think creatively around it, I think we can find ways that just sidesteps the issue.
Yeah. And Gudmundur, you and I were having a conversation about kind of taking small bites and incrementally moving things forward. Is maybe this whole PII, GDPR, an area where we do what we can, maybe pick the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, and also I always feel like we're looking for this magic solution. That's the solution for everything. These huge platforms to share data, and we want to share everything. But I think we should be focusing on more smaller projects, individual projects. Be agile. Just being able to work with everyone the way they want. If you really want to be able to share data between agencies, airlines, you just have to work really closely with them and be really agile. Yeah. But on the GDPR topic, I mean, everyone in data hates GDPR. There's nothing worse than that. Yeah. And it is a headache. It is a real headache, but you just have to build a good foundation. I mean, the sample I showed you, it was a big headache to be able to share the commercial data. It was we had to have so many, we had to build so many processes around it to make sure that it was non-identifiable. We couldn't know who the person was, so we had to round down the numbers, and we had to make a lot of adjustment to the data, and we just have to work with it.
Yeah, and so that's really important, and I think perhaps that plays into the third-party element as well, and I think there are probably a couple of examples, but as I mentioned with the air tags, and I was in a gate area at one point in time when the agent came on and speaking to a flight delay said, okay, I know all of you probably know more about this than I do, but here's the information I have. I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way to preface what you're going to tell us, right? But in the AirTag situation with a couple of those meltdowns, as I mentioned, the passengers, the customers all of a sudden had more information about where their bag was. They were calling the airline saying, here's where it is, here's exactly where it is, go get it, right? So I wanted to kind of bring in the element of opt-in, right? Because when the industry, and I thought this was a great example, the industry met at Apple headquarters in their headquarter building in Austin, and Apple wanted to understand. They really, truly wanted to provide a solution, but they were hung up on privacy. As we all know, Apple values that very highly. And they kept saying, privacy, privacy, privacy. There's no way we could allow that AirTag data to be shared. But the airlines are saying, wait, we need it. There's a reason. And they would probably want to share it. So where does opt-in kind of come into that? And happily, Apple provided a solution that could get that data with opt-in directly into the airlines' databases and information around baggage. But where does opt-in play in? Thoughts, Nicole?
So I think it's a lot of communication. Whether it's with our guests to say, hey, if you put on location services, we can help you navigate through the airport. I think it's explaining why we want access to this data, what we are going to use it for, and really build confidence with our guests about it's not going to be just shared widely for craps and giggles. It's going to have a purpose that's going to make your journey better. Right. And we're going to do everything in our power to protect it. We're not infallible. Data breaches do happen, and they're scary. But what can we show that are the metrics or the stopgaps in place that is going to do our best to protect your data and just build that trust? It's the same with our internal stakeholders, our airports, our on the ramp agents. We need to build that trust that we're not just taking the data for data's sake. We are using it to make something better and make your job easier, make your experience more efficient and maybe even enjoyable. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about how we're approaching innovation at Alaska. We meet with our data privacy team regularly. We meet with our supply chain regularly. We're going to be setting up calls with our station leaders regularly to say, hey, this is what we're looking at. What are your concerns? What can we do to get ahead of these problems and these very valid issues so that we don't have a stopgap later on. We can ask for the right documentation from our vendors, whether that's SOX compliance, whether that's an ISO certification. And if those vendors don't have it, can they get it? If they can't, what can we do to maybe still work with them, or do we need to let that project go? Because we don't think our guests' information will be safe. And as AI, as sensors become more and more credible and more available at airports, what can we do to be like, hey, no, this is completely anonymized. With our bags ID, it immediately, you can't see any guest information. We're just looking at your bags. Yeah. We don't care who you are, what you are. You can be an alien from the Denver airport for all we care. We just want to know what your bags look like.
So there are aliens in
Oh,
Denver.
absolutely.
Okay, all right.
I've been
checking.
in those tunnels.
All right, yeah. You have a lot of experience there. So someone asked a really good question about regular versus irregular ops. I mean, in irregular ops situations, wow, that communication is a key factor, right?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. One of the things that I think an airport does with data is we are an advocate for a lot of things, especially in the U.S. where our federal partners, the CBP, the TSA, are so critical to irregular ops. One of the things that I think the most valuable thing we do when an airline has irregular ops is our executives get on the phone and are begging, yelling, screaming, whatever the phrase is, to TSA to get more officers, or the CBP to get more officers, to send our police officers. And so the earlier that data can be shared, that irregular operations is about to happen, the faster that we can help advocate for the passengers and the airlines. And so I think that's one of the values of data sharing with something like that.
Yeah. Other thoughts on irregular ops, or the two of those, Keith?
I'll just throw in that from my own personal experience, it's making decisions early on in the program when you do have irregular ops is absolutely essential. Now, AI technology is something that can really help you to understand what is going to happen in the future, and being brave to make those decisions nice and early, and then you will alleviate not necessarily completely cure the problem, but you will make the journey better for the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a bright, sunny day, though, in London. Every day is sunny? No, it's not. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of somewhere else.
You've gone to
Maybe
another
Vegas.
London.
I spent too much time in Vegas. So someone's asking about bag data from the airlines. And one of those pieces of low-hanging fruit, I think, is the number of bags on a flight, right? I mean, from an airport standpoint, as whatever system we have assigning carousels, perhaps very dynamically, it'd be much better to know whether there are 20 bags, or helpful to know whether there are 20 bags or 70 bags on a flight, right? So how do we even pluck some of that really low-hanging, what seems to me to be really low-hanging data? Doesn't involve privacy of any kind, it's just like a number. We've got 20 bags on this flight, right? And when the flight launches. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is low-hanging fruit. Before I came to Alaska, I was working for a ULCC, and the biggest obstacle there was we didn't have a way to track bags. We weren't scanning bags because it's a process. How many scans do you need? How many devices do you need to really be able to support that across the network? Because if you're going to have bag scanning in one airport but not another, you're missing half of the data set. So the short answer is it is low-hanging fruit, but it does rely on either a scanning system within the airport itself, whether that's on the bag handling system or not, or it's on the airline to invest additional hardware and software to scan the bags at every possible scan point across their entire network. Otherwise, we're working with bingo sheets, and those get thrown away or they get blown onto the ramp as FOD. Very hard to keep track of because they're just paper and pencil.
Right, back to the clipboard, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So one question here is talks about standards and how do we kind of start to build standards as an industry. And maybe this is a think tank that could start to put trials in place, to put proofs of concepts in place, and actually maybe start putting some frameworks, broad frameworks together. Thoughts on that? Gudmundur, any?
Okay, I can tell I'm not a big fan of standards because I think we overcomplicate these things.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working really, I can take Keflavik for an example. We're working really closely with the airlines at Keflavik, especially the hub carrier. And it's not the standards that are the issues. It's just the people that are working there. I mean, if you have good data people, they will find a way to work together. And we don't have to wait 10 years for some standards from some.
I think similar to that is not a standard, but communicate. Stop saying no, stop saying, oh no, we can't do this because of GDPR or what PII. Let's sit down and be like, hey, this is what we're trying to do and why. How can we work within the framework that exists to protect our guests to make it happen? And I think you're exactly right. There's no one way to do that. There's no standard beyond let's communicate, let's sit down together and collaborate.
Yeah.
I do think, real quick,
Please.
I do think one thing about standards that I think you might agree with is if we could have a standard or common frameworks about how we measure things. We're doing a lot of work with time stamping, and I know we have some great ideas how to measure when a plane is on stand, off block, that kind of things. But it'd be great to know that what we're doing at in DC is the same as everybody else. So standards and how we measure, I think, is important.
I completely agree.
Yep.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for all of the panelists, and I know this conversation could have gone on much longer, but I think really as we wrap up here, once again, one of the things we want to do is tear down those data silos, right? Really work, and maybe it's more about putting proofs of concept in place, really engaging in a broader conversation. So what we really want to do in terms of next steps is bring others into the conversation. You'll get more information about the think tank coming up. So we would really love to have a much broader group on board and really continuing to effectively tear down these data silos so we can fly forward into a very bright, data-connected future. So will you join me in thanking our wonderful panelists today?